Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
Michael Corinthos was deep in thought as he sat in the Quartermain living room, staring at the crackling fireplace. Everything around him seemed quiet, too quiet for a house usually filled with family arguments, phone calls, and the chaos that came with being a Corinthos and a Quartermain. But tonight, the silence felt heavy. He'd spent the last few weeks digging into something he probably shouldn't have, something that had started as harmless curiosity but quickly turned into a discovery that would blow apart two lives in Port Charles. It all began when Michael overheard a conversation between Dex and Jocelyn at Kelly's. They were talking about Ronnie Frazier, the man who'd recently arrived in town with a mysterious past. Michael hadn't paid much attention to Ronnie before, but when Dex mentioned the name Jacinda Holt in the same breath, Michael's instincts kicked in. Something about their connection didn't feel right. Jacinda was charming, composed, and fiercely protective of her privacy. She'd recently started working at Aurora Media, reporting directly to Michael, and though she was professional, she carried an air of mystery that Michael couldn't quite shake. When Michael started looking into her background, it wasn't out of suspicion at first, just curiosity. But the more he searched, the more inconsistencies he found. Jacinda claimed she'd grown up in New York and had no living family, yet there were no records to confirm that. Meanwhile, Ronnie's past was a puzzle of its own. He'd bounced from job to job, city to city, and had only recently settled in Port Charles under vague circumstances. Something told Michael that the connection between them ran deeper than anyone realized. A few days later, Michael found himself sitting in front of his computer at Aurora, reviewing old personnel files. His gut told him to look where others wouldn't. He cross-referenced Ronnie's records with hospital archives, birth certificates, and old police databases. It was then that he stumbled upon something that made his blood run cold. Both Ronnie and Jacinda shared the same mother's name on their birth certificates, Diana Holt. Two different fathers, two different lives, but the same mother. Michael leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as the realization sank in. "Oh my God," he muttered under his breath. "They're brother and sister." He sat there for a long moment, the glow of the screen illuminating his face. The air in the office suddenly felt heavier, like the walls themselves were closing in. This wasn't just gossip or idle curiosity anymore. This was a secret that could shatter lives, especially because Ronnie and Jacinda weren't just friends. They were dating. Michael's chest tightened. He'd seen the way Jacinda looked at Ronnie, the way they whispered to each other at the Metro Court, thinking no one noticed. But people noticed, especially Michael. And now, knowing what he knew, he couldn't unsee it. The truth was too horrifying to ignore. The next morning, Michael couldn't focus. He kept replaying the discovery in his head as he sat at his desk at Aurora. Every ring of his phone startled him, every knock at the door made his stomach clench. When Jacinda walked in, all confident smiles and soft perfume, his heart sank. She handed him some reports, chatting casually, completely unaware that her entire world was about to crumble. "Everything okay, Michael?" she asked, sensing his distant mood. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," he replied, forcing a smile. Jacinda tilted her head. "You sure? You seem off." Michael wanted to say something right then, but the words caught in his throat. He watched her leave, and his heart twisted with guilt. He had to tell her, but how? How do you tell someone the person they love is their blood relative? That night, Michael drove to the Metro Court parking lot, where he knew Ronnie would be meeting Jacinda. He sat in his car for almost half an hour, watching them from a distance. They laughed as they stepped out of the restaurant, hand in hand, blissfully unaware. The sight made Michael's stomach turn. He'd seen a lot in his life, lies, betrayals, even murder, but this was something different. This was an innocent love built on a devastating secret. When Ronnie left to take a phone call, Michael seized his moment. He got out of the car and walked up to Jacinda. She smiled when she saw him. "Hey, Michael. Fancy seeing you here." He tried to smile back, but his expression betrayed him. "Jacinda, we need to talk." She frowned. "Now? What's going on?" It's about Ronnie, Michael said quietly. Her face tightened. What about him? Michael hesitated, his heart pounding. I found something. Something you need to know. Michael, you're scaring me. What is it? He looked into her eyes, seeing the confusion and the innocence there. Jacinda. Ronnie's your brother. For a long, terrible moment, she didn't react. It was like the words didn't register. Then her face went pale. What did you just say? I found records, birth certificates. You both share the same mother. Diana Holt. Different fathers, but the same blood. Jacinda shook her head, stepping back as if the ground had been pulled from under her. No. No, that's not possible. My mother never had another child. You're wrong. I wish I was, Michael said softly. But I checked everything twice. It's real. Tears welled in her eyes. Oh my God, no. This can't be real. Ronnie returned just in time to see Jacinda's distress. Hey, what's going on? He asked, walking up quickly. Jacinda turned toward him, trembling. Michael says, he says you're my brother. Ronnie froze, looking between them. What? Michael handed him the folder he'd brought. It's all in there. I didn't want to believe it either, but the records are clear. Ronnie flipped through the papers, his hands shaking. He read the names, the dates, the birth records, and then stopped cold at their mother's name. He looked up at Michael, his eyes burning. Why would you do this to us? I didn't do anything, Ronnie. I just found the truth. Ronnie's jaw tightened. You should have stayed out of it. You had no right. Jacinda stepped between them, sobbing. Stop it. Just stop. You think I want this? You think I wanted to find out the man I love is my brother? The silence that followed was suffocating. Ronnie dropped the folder, the papers scattering across the pavement. He turned away, pacing in disbelief. Jacinda fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she clutched one of the documents like it could somehow erase the truth. Michael knelt beside her, his voice soft. I'm sorry, Jacinda. I wish I didn't have to tell you. But you deserved to know. Ronnie stood there for a long time, staring into the night. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I don't even know who I am anymore. Days passed, and the fallout spread through Port Charles like wildfire. Word got around quickly, first whispered rumors, then outright shock. Sonny heard about it from Brick, who'd been keeping tabs on Ronnie for unrelated reasons. That's a hell of a mess, Sonny muttered when Michael told him everything. You did the right thing, but that kind of truth? It's poison. Once it's out, nobody walks away clean. Michael sighed. I know. But I couldn't just sit back and let them keep living a lie. Sonny nodded slowly. You did what you had to. But make no mistake, this is gonna break them both. At General Hospital, Jacinda couldn't focus on work. Her friends tried to comfort her, but she was distant, haunted. How do I erase this? She asked Elizabeth, who had sat with her during lunch. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. And I can't forget what we were. Elizabeth's heart broke for her. You can't erase it, Jacinda. All you can do is start healing. None of this is your fault. Ronnie, on the other hand, disappeared for a few days. When he returned, he showed up at Michael's office, looking like he hadn't slept. I need to talk, he said flatly. Michael nodded. Come in. Ronnie closed the door behind him and sat down. I've been thinking about what you said, about the records. I checked them myself. You were right. Michael looked at him carefully. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Ronnie shook his head. No. I needed to know. I wish I'd known before I destroyed everything with her. She didn't know either, Michael said quietly. I know, Ronnie murmured. That's what hurts the most. He looked up, his eyes filled with pain. You think we'll ever be okay? Michael sighed. Maybe not right away. But someday, yeah. The truth hurts, Ronnie, but it's better than living a lie. Ronnie nodded, then stood. Tell Jacinda I'll stay out of her way. She deserves peace. After he left, Michael sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of it all settle over him. He had done what was right, but right didn't always mean easy. That night, Jacinda called him. Her voice was quiet, raw from crying. Thank you, Michael, she said softly. For telling me the truth even when it broke me. Michael closed his eyes. You didn't deserve to be hurt like that. Maybe not, she whispered, but at least now I know who I really am. As the line went dead, Michael looked out over the city of Port Charles. The truth had come out, and lives had changed forever. There was no going back, no undoing what had been revealed. But deep down, he knew he'd done what had to be done. Secrets in Port Charles always had a way of destroying people, and this blood secret, was no different. The oppressive humidity of a Port Charles summer had settled over the city like a damp blanket, making the air in the hospital corridors feel thick and heavy. Michael Corinthos stood at the nurse's station on the pediatric floor, reviewing a file for a young patient in the Corinthos Foundation's care. His suit jacket was slung over his arm, and his tie was loosened, the weight of the day already pressing on him. He was a man who prided himself on control, on order, on the meticulous architecture of his life, both personal and professional. It was a defense mechanism, a fortress he had built brick by brick against the chaos that had so often defined his family. He was about to head to his mother's office, hoping for a quiet moment to discuss a new charitable initiative, when a flash of familiar, vibrant color caught his eye. Down the hall, near a secluded bank of elevators, stood his aunt, Carly. But it wasn't her presence that gave him pause, it was the person she was with, and the intensity of their interaction. Carly's hands were animated, slicing through the air as she spoke in low, urgent tones to Ronnie. Ronnie K., the NYPD detective turned PI, a man whose very existence was a testament to the grimy underbelly of the city that Michael's father, Sonny, operated within. What was his aunt, a woman who had recently been embracing a new chapter of respectability and love with Drew, doing having a clandestine-looking conversation with a man like Ronnie? Michael took an instinctive step back into the shadow of a large medical cart, his curiosity piqued. He couldn't hear the words, but the body language was a novel of tension. Carly wasn't just talking, she was pleading, her posture rigid with a mixture of fear and desperation. Ronnie, a mountain of a man with a perpetually cynical expression, was listening, but his arms were crossed, his head tilted in a way that suggested not sympathy, but a cold, transactional assessment. Then, a single word, sharp and clear, cut through the muffled hospital sounds and reached Michael's ears. A name. Jacinda. The name landed like a physical blow. Jacinta Zaccaro. What was she now? An ex-lover? A complicated friend? A permanent, painful knot in the tapestry of his past. Her brief, tumultuous return to Port Charles had ended as explosively as it had begun, leaving a trail of emotional wreckage in its wake. Her connection to his family, through his cousin Jocelyn, and her own tangled history with Sonny's business, made her name a trigger for a host of complicated feelings. Why were Carly and Ronnie discussing Jacinda with such palpable urgency? The conversation ended abruptly. Carly pressed a sealed envelope into Ronnie's hand. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, tucked it inside his leather jacket, and turned on his heel, striding toward the staff elevator without a backward glance. Carly watched him go, her shoulders slumping for a moment before she straightened them, a practiced gesture of resilience Michael had seen 1,000 times. She smoothed her dress, composed her face into a more neutral mask, and walked off in the opposite direction, toward the main elevators. Michael stood frozen, the patient file forgotten in his hand. This wasn't a casual chat. This was a transaction. Carly was hiring Ronnie, and it involved Jacinda. A cold dread, the kind he associated with the worst moments of his life, began to uncoil in his stomach. Was Jacinda in trouble? Was she a threat? The questions swarmed, but one thing was certain, he couldn't ask Carly. She would deflect, she would lie, she would do what she always did, try to protect him, to manage the narrative. But Michael was no longer a boy to be protected. He was the CEO of a multinational corporation, a father, a man who had earned the right to the truth, no matter how ugly. His course was set. He wouldn't confront Carly. He would go to the source. He would find Ronnie. Tracking down the PI was less difficult than he anticipated. Ronnie wasn't a man who favored subtlety or secrecy in his professional haunts. A few discreet inquiries to contacts in the legal world pointed Michael toward a dive bar down by the docks, a place called the Wharf Rat, where the lighting was low and questions were not asked. The smell of stale beer, brine, and old wood hit Michael as he pushed open the door, the stark contrast to the sterile, air-conditioned environment of General Hospital almost jarring. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the gloom. And there, in a corner booth, a single glass of whiskey in front of him, sat Ronnie. He was studying something on his phone, his brow furrowed. Michael approached, the worn floorboards creaking under his polished Oxfords. Ronnie looked up, his expression not one of surprise, but of weary expectation, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment. "Corinthos," Ronnie said, his voice a low rumble. "Figured one of you would show up eventually. Have a seat. You're blocking my light." Michael slid into the booth opposite him, refusing to be intimidated. "We need to talk." "About?" Ronnie took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving Michael's. "About my aunt, Carly. About the envelope she gave you today at the hospital. And about Jacinda Zachara." Ronnie let out a short, humorless bark of laughter. "Direct. I'll give you that. Not like your old man, who talks in circles, or your aunt, who thinks she can sweet-talk her way through anything. But see, here's the thing, kid. Client confidentiality. It's a real concept. I don't discuss one client's business with another, especially when they're from the same screwed-up family tree. I'm not here as a client. I'm here for the truth," Michael said, his voice tight. "Jacinda was important to me. If she's in some kind of danger, or if she's causing some kind of problem, I have a right to know." "Right?" Ronnie leaned forward, his bulk casting a shadow over the table. "You don't have a right to squat. You live in a world built on your family's name and money, but that doesn't mean you get to see all the dirty little secrets that keep the foundation from crumbling. Carly hired me to look into something. That's all you need to know. Now, why don't you run along back to your corner office and let the grown-ups handle the messy stuff?" The condescension was a spark on the dry tinder of Michael's frustration. "I'm not a child, Ronnie. And I'm not leaving until I get some answers. What does Carly want with Jacinda? Is it about my father? About the business?" Ronnie studied him for a long moment, a calculating glint in his eyes. He seemed to be weighing Michael's resolve, measuring his capacity for handling a hard truth. He gestured to the bartender for another glass and pushed it toward Michael, pouring a generous measure of amber liquid from the bottle he had on the table. "Fine," Ronnie said, the word a concession that felt more like a threat. "You want a truth? I'll give you a truth. But you're not gonna like it. And you're not going to get it for free." Michael ignored the glass. "What's your price?" "Information is a two-way street," Ronnie said, swirling the whiskey in his own glass. "Carly hired me to do a deep background on Jacinda. Deeper than the usual stuff. She's spooked. Thinks there's something off, something hidden. My job is to find it. You knew Jacinda, intimately. You tell me something. Did she ever talk about her family? Her childhood? Not the sanitized version, the real one." Michael's mind raced. This was a trap, he knew it. But it was the only way forward. He thought back to his time with Jacinda, to the late-night conversations, the moments of vulnerability amidst the drama. She didn't talk about it much," Michael began, choosing his words carefully. "She mentioned her mother was out of the picture. Died when she was young. She was raised by her father, but it was difficult. She said he was a hard man, that he taught her to be tough, to never show weakness. She always had this shield up. Like she was constantly preparing for a fight. Ronnie nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something. A fight. Yeah, that tracks. Did she ever mention a sibling? A brother or a sister? Michael frowned, digging through his memories. No. Never. She always presented herself as an only child. Alone in the world. A slow, grim smile spread across Ronnie's face. It was devoid of warmth. That's what she wanted people to think. See, that's the first layer of the lie. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it across the table to Michael. It was a scanned image of an old, faded birth certificate. The name was too blurry to read, but the box for number of children in birth was clearly marked, too. What is this? Michael asked, his heart beginning to hammer against his ribs. That, Mr. Corinthos, is the birth certificate for Lena, Jacinda's mother. It indicates she gave birth to twins. 2 girls. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Twins. Jacinda had a twin sister. The revelation was staggering, a fundamental rewrite of a part of his history with her. All that time, all that shared pain and passion, and she had never once mentioned a sister. The depth of the secret was shocking. Why would she hide that? Michael whispered, more to himself than to Ronnie. Why do any of you people hide anything? Ronnie countered, retrieving his phone. Shame. Fear. Protection. Or maybe the sister is the key to something else. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Carly had a hunch. A mother's intuition, she called it. She felt Jacinda's reappearance was too convenient, her animosity too personal. She thought there was a deeper connection, something tying Jacinda to the family in a way we hadn't figured out. So, I started digging into the other twin. The one who vanished. Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bar's air conditioning. Did you find her? Ronnie's grim smile returned. I found a ghost. A woman who's been scrubbed from existence. No social security trail after the age of 18, no employment records, no digital footprint. It's a professional-level erase job. The kind of thing that costs serious money or requires serious connections. Who could do that? Michael asked, his mind reeling through the list of Port Charles power players who had the means and the motive. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Ronnie said. But ghosts leave echoes. I found a former neighbor from when the girls were kids. An old woman with a memory like a steel trap. She remembered the twins. Jacinda, the fiery, outgoing one. And the other one, quiet, watchful, always in her sister's shadow. She remembered their names. Jacinda, and her sister, Rose. Rose. The name hung in the air between them, simple and innocent, a stark contrast to the dark mystery it represented. Rose, Michael repeated, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. Yeah. Rose Sakura, Ronnie said. But here's where it gets interesting. The old woman said the family was tight with another family back in the day. The father, he did business with them. The name she remembered. Cassadine. The chill in Michael's spine turned to ice. Cassadine. The name was a curse in his family's history, synonymous with betrayal, madness, and a vendetta that spanned generations. The pieces, jagged and ill-fitting, began to shift in his mind. A connection between Jacinda's hidden past and the Cassadines? It was a terrifying prospect. This can't be a coincidence, Michael said, his voice hoarse. In this town? Nothing is, Ronnie stated flatly. I've been pulling on this thread for days. And I finally hit pay dirt this morning. A sealed adoption record from a private clinic in Switzerland, funded through a shell corporation that traces back to a Cassadine family trust. The adoption wasn't for a baby. It was for a 15-year-old girl. Rose Sakura. Michael felt the air leave his lungs. The Cassidines adopted Jacinda's twin sister? Not adopted in the warm, fuzzy sense, Ronnie corrected. It reads more like an acquisition. They took her, gave her a new identity, a new life. They erased Jacinda's sister and created someone new. Who? Michael demanded, his patience shattering. Who did they turn her into? Ronnie's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression changed. The cynical detachment was replaced by a flicker of something else, triumph? Satisfaction? He looked back at Michael. That, Ronnie said, standing up and throwing a few bills on the table, is what I'm about to go and confirm. The final piece of the puzzle. You want to know? Come with me. But I'm warning you, Corinthos. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. Your world, and your family's world, is about to be turned inside out. Without waiting for an answer, Ronnie strode out of the bar. Michael, his heart a frantic drum against his chest, didn't hesitate. He followed. They got into Ronnie's beat-up sedan and drove in silence, the tension in the car so thick it was suffocating. They weren't heading toward the bad part of town, or the docks, or any of the places Michael associated with Ronnie's line of work. They were heading toward the metro area, to a neighborhood of upscale boutiques and trendy cafes. Ronnie pulled over a block away from a chic, minimalist art gallery. He pointed through the windshield. There. That's the echo of the ghost. Michael followed his gaze. And there she was. Jacinda. Or, was it? The woman had Jacinda's face, her bone structure, her height. But the hair was different, sleeker, more professionally styled. The clothes were different, elegant, understated, expensive. The posture was different, poised, confident, almost regal. She was speaking with a couple, gesturing toward a large abstract painting on the wall, her smile polished and professional. It was Jacinda, and yet, it wasn't. That's her, Michael stammered. That's Jacinda. Is it? Ronnie asked, his voice low and steady. Look closer. Look at her left hand. Michael squinted. The woman turned slightly, laughing at something the man said. On her left hand, on the ring finger, was a simple, elegant platinum band. And just above the wrist, on the inside of her forearm, was a small, distinctive tattoo, a delicate, stylized rose. Jacinda didn't have a tattoo. Michael was sure of it. He knew every inch of her body. This was a mark that had never been there. The realization crashed over him with the force of a tidal wave, stealing his breath, his thoughts, his very sense of reality. It wasn't Jacinda. It was the ghost. It was Rose. My God, he breathed. She's here. In Port Charles. Not just here, Ronnie said, his tone grimly final. She's been here for a while. Integrated. Successful. Living a life right under your noses. But, who is she? Michael asked, his world shrinking to the woman in the gallery window. What name is she using? Ronnie pulled a single sheet of paper from his inside jacket pocket. It was a printout of a society page from the Port Charles Press. The headline read, Local Gallery Owner Named to Arts Council Board. Below it was a photograph of the same woman, her smile gracious and public. The caption beneath the photo was clear, the letters burning themselves into Michael's retinas. The caption read, Ms. Lena Rampling, owner of the Rampling Gallery, celebrates her new appointment. Lena. Their mother's name. She had taken their mother's name. Michael stared, uncomprehending for a moment, his brain refusing to process the information. Lena Rampling. He knew that name. He'd seen it on charity boards, in the business section of the paper. Drew had even mentioned her once, in passing, as a sharp, savvy businesswoman who had quickly carved out a niche for herself in the city's cultural scene. She was a respected, if somewhat aloof, member of the community. She wasn't aloof. She was hidden in plain sight. And then, the final, devastating piece clicked into place with the force of a seismic shock, shattering the foundation of everything he thought he knew. Lena Rampling. He had seen her name recently, in a different context. On a guest list. A charity hospital gala that his mother, Bobby Spencer, had been instrumental in organizing. Bobby had been complaining just last week about a last-minute, but very generous, donation that had come with a condition, a +1 invitation for the donor's nephew. The donor was Lena Rampling. The nephew's name was Spencer. Spencer Cassadine. The blood drained from Michael's face, leaving him cold and numb. Spencer. Nicholas Cassadine's son. Trina's boyfriend. Jocelyn's friend. A Cassadine. The adoption, the Shell Corporation, the Cassadine Trust, it all led here. Rose Zachara wasn't just some anonymous woman. She had been molded, educated, and placed into their world as Lena Rampling. And Spencer, he wasn't just her nephew. It was a cover. A brilliant, twisted, monstrous cover. Spencer Cassadine was Lena Rampling's son. Which meant the truth, the full, horrifying, inescapable truth, exploded in Michael's mind. Jacinda Zachara and Lena Rampling, née Rose Zachara, were twins. Spencer Cassadine was Lena's son. That made Spencer Jacinda's nephew. But the connections, the implications, went deeper, weaving a web of blood and betrayal that ensnared his entire family. Spencer was a Cassadine, yes, but through his father, Nicholas. But his mother was a Zachara. The Zacharas and the Corinthos family had a history of violence and vendetta. This was a union of two of his family's greatest enemies. And Jacinda, she had known. She had to have known. Her return, her affair with Michael, her manipulations, was it all part of a plan? A long-game revenge orchestrated by the Cassadines, using the Zachara twins as pawns? Had he been nothing more than a target? Had the feelings they shared, the pain, the passion, been a lie scripted by his enemies? He thought of Spencer, a young man he had considered, if not family, then at least connected through the complex web of Port Charles relationships.